Hello class, welcome back. Today we're finishing up our introduction to Species 2 counterpoint rules, and I'll send you off with an assignment to compose your first Species 2 exercise. Okay, so a quick review. Remember last time we went over the basics that in Species 2 we're building off Species 1, and that on the downbeat we have consonance, followed by a possibility of dissonance, and then again back to consonance. Notice in measure 2, on the weak beat that we have a consonance again, which is fine. Measure 3, measure 4, dissonance again. Okay, contrary motion, nice. Strong, weak, again 2 consonances in a row. Same thing. Here's measure 8. Strong. The tritone. Resolving to a unison there. This would be a good thing for you to try at home. Make sure that you understand the basic rules, and make sure you're hearing them as consonance, dissonance. Another thing you can do is try singing one of the voices, especially if you know your solfeggio. That would be really helpful. Okay. This was a quick review that we made last time, that basically the different types of consonances, perfect versus imperfect, and the different kinds of dissonances, seconds, fourths, sevenths. Okay, and here we're talking about harmonic consonance and harmonic dissonance, as opposed to melodic. We already said consonances can only occur on strong, consonants can occur on strong and weak beats. We must have them on downbeats. Dissonance can only occur on weak beats, and it must be stepwise. That means passing motion or neighboring motion. And again, depending on the textbook you're reading, some say, well, no, really, passing motion is historically correct. Other textbooks will say, well, no, really, neighboring tone is fine. So again, this is one problem with different theory textbooks, but the same idea applies, which is that it must be in stepwise motion. Okay, here's another example of strong versus weak, consonance versus dissonance. And notice that there's a rest in this measure, which is curious. We didn't cover that last time, and it's something that should be pointed out, that this is the most common way to begin a Species 2 exercise. It's not the only way, but it's the most common way. And notice which voice that's in. Of course, it's the voice with half notes, because the cantus firmus cannot be changed. It's our given voice, our fixed voice. The counterpoint, of course, in Species 2, we're composing 2 notes against 1 note. However, at the beginning of an exercise or a melody, you have the option of creating a counterpoint starting with a rest, and that sounds like this. Okay, and you can tell already when you jump into this exercise, it's as if we're jumping into the middle of the action. It's already begun. Try to picture perhaps a TV show or a movie where the first scene, you're in the middle of action. You're not getting introduced to anything. You're in it already. This has a kind of forward momentum, which is very nice. Okay, great. Another thing about the ending, also known as the cadence, is that we have the option of using what will look very much like the Species 1 ending. Re, do, met with T, do. 7 going to 1. Sound familiar? Well, we composed many of those in Species 1, and you have the option of using them, the same cadence in Species 2. Is that the only way to end? Well, no, as we'll see, and as you went over in your homework, you do have more options. So this is great news because, as I've been saying, species 2, although it seems more complicated, is actually simpler because you have many more options. You have the option to begin on the downbeat, or you could begin with a rest. You have the option to end with a species 1 counterpoint, or you could end with species 2. And what does that look like? Okay, let's look over here for an example. Here you have the counterpoint below the Cantus Firmus. Again, this composer, Kierenberger, chose to start their counterpoint with a rest, and notice that they're ending the cadence using a species 2 ending, which means two notes against one note. And how does that work? Well, again, here's our re, do, scale degree 2 moving to scale degree 1. All right, and here's scale degree 7 moving to scale degree 1. So you always need the second to last note to be that leading tone in the counterpoint. All right, what comes before that? Well, here is a classic ending where you have a fifth moving to a third, moving to a unison. That sounds like this. Now, some of you might be tempted to say, well, what about the la, ti, do ending? La, ti, do, la, ti, do. Can that work? Well, unfortunately, when the counterpoint is below the Cantus Firmus, that would mean that we would create a dissonance. So if we put an A here instead of a G, that would create the distance of a fourth, or dissonance of a fourth. We don't want that on the downbeat. So la, ti, do doesn't work when the counterpoint is below. However, it does work if you switch them. So when the counterpoint is above, la, ti, do is a great ending. 6, 7, 1. Okay. So this also had a lot of examples of different types of motion. We reviewed this last time: passing motion, neighboring motion. That's upper neighbor. Here's your lower neighbor. Again, in New York City, everyone understands the idea of living below or above someone, or both. Sometimes I've certainly had my share of living in various apartment buildings, and often you end up visiting your neighbors for one reason or another. Well, you can visualize that here. You start with you start from home, you walk to your upper neighbor and come back, or you start at home and you go to your lower neighbor and come back. Okay, same idea. So that coming back home means you're coming back to consonance. All right, so all of this is review for you. You spent some time with try it number 1 and you got some feedback. We spent some time looking at closing patterns. This is what we just said, the sol, ti, do ending when you have the counterpoint below. You have the counterpoint below, sol, ti, do. Here's the opposite, as I was just saying. Here's la, ti, do, when you have the counterpoint above. In a minor mode, it will look different, but it will sound very much the same. This is in the key of D minor. Here we have la, ti, do. Here we have re, do. Okay, so everything is operating as we are used to. Okay, well, what about here? This is la. Is this la, ti, do? What is this? I can't figure this out. Well, this is in D, right? D minor. How could I tell that? Well, I'm looking at the end. This is scale degree 3, 2, 1 in the Cantus Firmus. We know that the second to last note needs to be the leading tone. Oh, here it is. Oh, this looks like species 1 ending. Okay, so that's why it's possible to use sol, la, ti, do when we're spacing it out over 3 measures. So this is possible. So when you have the counterpoint below, it is possible to use sol, la, ti, do, but only if you're spacing that out over a few measures versus 2 measures. Okay, so this is scale degree 5, 6, 7, 1. What does that sound like? I'm sorry, yeah. An upper voice, me, re, do, sol, la, ti, do, me, re, do. Okay, there you have it. And the last ending, here we have the counterpoint above, the cantus firmus, me, re, do in the cantus firmus, sol, la, ti, do in the upper voice. Okay, so this is invertible counterpoint. All right, what does that mean, invertible counterpoint? Well, it means you can switch the two voices. So the bottom voice moves up and the top voice moves down. So you can invert it and it still works. Invertible counterpoint. All right, and you tried your try it number 2 and you got some feedback. Make sure you're keeping up with your homework, so we can go on and this week you'll try composing your own. Okay, so moving on, here we have some another example of a melody, a counterpoint against cantus firmus that works very well. Remember that your textbook does things a little bit differently than I do. We're going to circle all our perfect consonances first. We'll put triangles around dissonance, triangles around dissonance, perfect consonants, perfect consonants. Okay. And look at that. All the dissonances are in the correct place on the weak beat. All the perfect consonances, well, they're not. Let's say we saw 2 back-to-back fifths or 2 back-to-back octaves. That would be a problem. What about this over here? Sometimes we see a fifth moving to an octave. Is that a problem? Well, let's look at it in detail. First, let's listen. It doesn't really stick out in my mind. So you can check it with your ears and say, does that stick out, or is that accented in some way? I didn't hear it quite in the same way. Let's see if you had. That would be parallel fifths. Oh, that wouldn't be good. Or how about this? That's really accented. Those were parallel octaves. But this, that's smooth. And why is that? Well, this is moving up by step. This is moving down. Okay, here we have contrary motion, and one of the voices is by step. This works really well. If both voices were leaping to an octave, which is possible, sometimes students do that accidentally. Let's see if I can find something that works. Right, ouch. Oh, I was leaping to a fifth. Okay, so technically it's not parallel fifths, it's not parallel octaves, but we're leaping. So it's, in contrary motion, both voices are leaping. It still has the sense of accent, so we also want to avoid that. Okay. Besides that, we should notice that here we start with the rest. We have a first species ending or a second species ending. Well, of course, there are two notes against one note in the second to last measure. Okay, so that's a second species ending. This is re do in the key of C major. And what do you have in the counterpoint? That's right, it's la ti do, 6, 7, 1. Remember that this works well when the counterpoint is above. Okay. Now, what about these leaps here? Now, we didn't talk too much about the consonant skip. What does that mean, the consonant skip? Well, it's sort of, the name is the description, isn't it? A consonant skip. Well, it means and by skip, it could refer to a leap as well. This is also some confusion. Consonant skip means that, for example, here you have B going to D. Why would this be considered a consonant skip? Because you're moving up by a third. Let's say you jumped up to an F. Now, there would be a couple problems with that, right? One is that in your upper voice, melodically, from left to right, this is not good because we're outlining the tritone. It's not great to do that. We're outlining the devil's interval, right? If we can step back into the minds of our 16th century composers, we want to avoid that interval. What about a seventh? What if we leapt up to a seventh? To our modern ears, this might sound fine. There are plenty of songs that do that, but to 16th century melodists, this would be a very difficult melody to sing. Not only that, when you go up a seventh, you're really accenting that high note. Try it sometime. It's very difficult to sing. Okay, so the basic idea is that you're skipping or leaping by a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, or an octave. However, you have to watch out for the tritone. The tritone can be a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth. Right? This would be the diminished fifth. This would be the augmented fourth. They're the same note. This is the higher F. This is the lower F. And both would be tritone. Okay, so be on the listen for that. And there's a good way to test it. Try singing it. If something sticks out to you, you say, what is that? Why does that stick out? Oh yeah, that's a melodic dissonance. Okay, that's a problem. Not only that, if we did have that fourth, that would of course create other problems. That would so leaping up by diminished fifth, excuse me, that would create the interval of a seventh. So remember, this is the really tough thing about creating a counterpoint, is that you're looking both horizontally and vertically. So when you're measuring this way, right, you're getting the interval of a seventh. That doesn't work. We don't want to leap into a dissonant interval, because you know that dissonance must be stepwise. Okay, so that's what makes it a consonant skip. What about over here? Same idea. Is this technically a skip? That I would call a leap, because it's a fourth, but that's fine. This is just a way of labeling consonant skip. Again, is this a tritone? Double check. Doesn't sound like a tritone. If you want to measure it, you have whole step plus half step. That's a perfect fourth. Okay, and notice, this is also really important. Mi, ti, do, re, mi. That once you leap down, you need to step up. We are recovering the lost motion, the ground that we passed over. Okay, and this does the same thing. E to G. That's a big leap and a step up. Okay. There you have it. Okay, I want to go to your homework assignment and get you started well. So let's look at that. Now this might take you a little longer, but it's worth doing. And again, I'm not expecting you to be perfect on this first try. I'm just expecting you to give it a try. You probably will make some mistakes, and that's okay. That's part of the learning process. Okay, so this says compose a second species counterpoint. Start with the beginning and then the ending. Then fill in the middle. Label the harmonic intervals, circle the perfect consonances, triangles around the dissonance. So this says start with a fifth or an octave. That would make sense, because we can't really start with a unison here. It's too low, right? So here I'm giving you a rest to begin with. Now, if we write a C here, we might have gotten ourselves into trouble already. We put a C here, and let's say we want to go up by stepwise motion. What do you notice already? Octave, octave. Ooh, this is a problem. Let's parallel octave. So we can't quite do that. Could we leap to another note? Well, here you're thinking, what are the possibilities? We could leap to a third above. We could leap to a fifth above. And we'll double check that these work. What about a sixth, yeah, or an octave. Now, if we're leaping upwards to a third, does that cause any problems? No, that's okay. If we leap up to a fifth, which would be the A, does that cause problems? Well, yeah, it's what we just saw. One voice is stepwise, but we're going in the same direction to a perfect consonance. This really has a way of leaping out, which is not great. So this is not a good option. Okay, so I'm going to remove that A. What about if I leap up to the B instead? Ooh, now this is a melodic seventh. So that this doesn't move very well. However, let's say I change the octave and I make this a C. Well, then that would move really, really nicely, actually, and that would be contrary motion. So maybe that's my best bet, to start with the C up there, move downwards. Okay, let's give that a try. Let's go with that for now. Remember, there are many answers. Okay, octave, this would be a sixth. Okay, then I'm gonna go to my ending. Now I'll probably end on the same note. So let's assume that I end on the same note here, as opposed to down an octave. Okay, and we can always change this later if you get into trouble. Now we need the leading tone. I gave you leading tone on the downbeat or weak beat. So either you need your leading tone to be here, which is a whole note, or you need to be here, which is the half note. Now, again, either way will work. It's a matter of what you want artistically and if you can get there. So this is easy enough. Put a whole note on the leading tone. And maybe this is not working. Maybe you want to lead up by stepwise motion. It's not working for me. So maybe I'll put this as a half note. Maybe that will help me get there more smoothly. There's that la, ti, do. Okay, so this could work as an ending too. 5, 6, octave. Okay. Now once I've done this, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5 measures now. So what am I thinking? Overall, I want to build a melody that goes up the mountain and then back down the mountain in general. If you can, that would be great. You don't want a melody that sounds like it's only 2 or 3 notes and it's just circling around. All right, you do want to go somewhere and come back down. That's one idea. You want to make sure that all your consonants that your downbeats are consonant, and that if you have dissonance, it's going to be in the weak position, on the weak beat. All right. Not only that, you need to make sure it's stepwise. So that's a lot of things to consider. Again, this takes some time, but it's fun also. Spend some time at the keyboard. Make sure you're double checking as you're playing. Oh, this works so far, I think. Yeah, okay, could we continue down in stepwise motion? Well, we have to see if that leads well to our long journey here. Okay, so do your best. Again, it might not be perfect the first time, but I want you to try. So these are going to be in half notes, right? Okay. I would leave probably about a half hour to an hour to do each of these, depending on how fast you are with intervals. And if you aren't a pianist, this might take a little bit longer. But you might have an advantage as a vocalist, let's say, because you'll be able to tell if it's easy to sing or not. Okay, and then I'd like you to go through and give it a try with, this is a little bit more difficult, but you'll go through this similar process. This says perfect unison or perfect octave, not perfect fifth. And why is that? Well, if we started with a perfect fifth here, an F, we're not sure, is this in the key of F or is it the key of C? Our ears can't quite tell. Right, we want to establish our key quickly. So it's either going to be unison here, middle C, or down an octave. Here, I'll try unison. Why not? But it could equally be an octave. Could I do the same thing? Could I start in the same way, a downwards motion? Sure. That's invertible. This would be a unison and moving to a third. Okay, and what about the ending? Well, if we're ending on middle C, if we're starting on middle C, we'll probably end on middle C. That will give us the best arc. So this says leading tone on downbeat or on weak beat. So again, either you'll have a leading tone here, whole note, or you'll have a leading tone here in the weak position. It's up to you. It's your artistic choice. And also that option will help you get out of problems. If you're having trouble getting to the ending somehow, having that option is really useful. Okay, and again, what's a good closing cadence option? Well, you could try the sol ti do instead of la ti do. Right here we had la ti do 6-7-1, but we can't do la ti do. Remember when we have the counterpoint below? So this is another good option. Okay, and that would be 5, 3, and okay, there you have it. We started our exercise. You can start it your own way, totally fine. Again, if you have the counterpoint starting up here, you're going to make a low, you're going to go down the mountain and then back up. All right, you're making a nice arc. All right, that would be your goal. All right, I think we're off to a great start with species 2. Again, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm just expecting that you give it a try. Make sure you're staying on top of your work. Again, feel free to contact me anytime you like, and we'll get together and give you some feedback. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and take care.